Please give a warm welcome to director Josh Cooley. Academy Award winner Josh Cooley.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for coming back, Josh.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to start with a far-fetched question. I grew up with my mom obsessed with biblical epic films like Ten Commandments and Spartacus and Ben-Hur. Do I see a connection between this film and those films?
Absolutely. I mean, when I first read the script for this movie, it was very different, but it still had the friends to enemies kind of arc to it. And so knowing that the entire thing would be set on Cybertron and that it would be, that world we've never seen before, it made me think of like a biblical epic, like Cain and Abel, just kind of boiling it down to good versus evil and brothers to enemies. So I looked at exactly those films that you just talked about as reference. And of course, those movies are 3.5 hours long. And so it's like, how can you get that into 80, 90 minutes?
But the friendship, that is the key to the film. And, tell us about focusing everything on that friendship, that relationship.
Yeah, that's the movie. So that was my touchstone for making this film, because there's so much lore in Transformers, there's so much extra story in all the different versions that I made sure that's my touchstone. I didn't want to ever lose sight of that. And I was always fascinated with the idea of two people coming from the same background and then being completely different. And my brother and I, for example, we grew up together. He's 3 years younger than I am, and we're not mortal enemies. But we had a great childhood, grew up, we did the same stuff. I grew up and become a writer-director, kind of living in Fantasyland, and my brother became a homicide detective, dealing with the realities of life. So very different paths, but I was always fascinated by that.
And, articulating the evolution of the villain, we never guess watching it where it's happening, but then you plant seeds throughout the film.
Yeah, that was, I was very excited to explore that with Megatron. I always thought of that quote where no villain thinks they're the villain of their own story, or villains think they're the heroes of their own story. And so, nobody sets out to be the bad guy, and I was thinking, how can we get the audience on board with Megatron and kind of like him and like seeing these two characters together, so that by the end of the movie, when they break apart, it's really tragic.
Mm-hmm. In the 1980s, we grew up watching, the animated cartoon of Transformers, but the younger generation is only used to the live action. For you, was it a challenge or a new freedom to navigate this new world with animation?
I found it very freeing, actually, specifically because we're not on Earth and it's on another planet. There's no humans involved. It allowed us to really focus the story to be a human story with these robots. And if, like you said, there's been the live action movies, which are all fish out of water stories where they come to Earth. There's also a lot of animated shows. There's a lot of video games. There's a lot of Transformers out there. But it was fun to kind of look at the whole sandbox and go, what pieces do we want to use to tell this story?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that there are no humans in this movie, but how were you able to work on the scale, the fact that we're seeing it through the point of view of the bots? Mm-hmm. Was that a challenge?
No, I never think of them as, they are physically robots. It's very similar to Toy Story in a way, actually, where it's like those characters are toys, but they have human emotions, and their characters are real. They're real people in that sense. And so the same thing here, which is that these happen to be robots, but they're just like us. They have the same emotions.
And tell us about that, the animation and the design of it. I noticed that, at the beginning, the bots have more of a rounded figure, and as it progresses, there's sort of more triangular.
Yeah, so this is a growing up story, but we didn't want to do kind of like the, a version where they're too young. It's not like they're the Muppet Babies or something like that. So still wanted to feel like they are younger, they're naive, they don't know, or speaking of Optimus specifically, now that he's Orion Pax at the beginning, he doesn't know everything yet. And so we purposefully designed them to be smaller. They don't have they have that piece missing that there's on purpose, the cog, yeah, it was on purpose that they see the hole there the entire time. I didn't want that covered up. I wanted it to be visually, you can see that they're missing something the entire time. And so they're that way, and then we designed it so that as they got bigger, just shot-wise, the camera would drop to make them just feel bigger in the frame, and then also they just look nice and clean like the new cars, and then they do get more angular and more just bulkier, just to get closer to what we know them as.
Although we're dealing, I mean, we have a lot of film students in the room. Although we're dealing with animation, you're still following the rules of filmmaking, angles and shots. I did notice that earlier in the film, there is a handheld quality to it, grainy quality to the film, and as it progresses, it moves away from that. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. I mean, everything, we treat this like it's live action. So I think I want to say down below when they're living underground, everything's more handheld because they're miners, they have a hard job down there. They also they don't really know the truth yet, so everything's a little more gritty. And I want to say we used all prime lenses down there, I think. And then once they come to the surface, we used anamorphic, so you get these nice big bokeh and a nice big wide landscape, and the shots change. They go from vertical and being kind of closed in to being wide open, and now everything's horizontal when they're up top.
Mm-hmm. And then the worlds, we have this underwater world that is darker, and then the outside is panoramic, epic in quality. Can you tell us about, delineating the differences?
I looked at a lot of, not just, Ben-Hur and Ten Commandments, but also like Lawrence of Arabia. The shots in that movie are just, unreal. And so I wanted that feeling of just this world is way bigger than our characters even know. And same with the audience, to kind of put them in the character's shoes. So it was all about the scale, and we used a lot of, I like Roadrunner cartoons, and so the design of the mountains are very Maurice Noble, who designed all those backgrounds for Roadrunner, and just knowing that the landscape itself would be able to transform, that's kind of why they're designed that way. So yeah, like I was saying, everything is expansive and large up top and very tight on the inside or down below. One of the other things is that this is something that is kind of background story that the audience isn't supposed to really see, but more feel, which is as they're going on their journey, when they first get up there, it's completely slick and all metal up there. But once they're continue on their journey, once a relationship starts to get a little tougher, that's when we start to introduce all of the alien nature, the life up there. So as their relationship gets tougher, their journey as well gets harder to traverse.
You mentioned my follow-up question, which was the planet is another character, and it transforms. Was that always in the script, or was it something that you brought in?
The idea of the planet transforming kind of was there from the very beginning, but we didn't know what it would look like. It was just like, it's all metal. They transform, maybe the planet can as well, and so it was important to make that part of the story, but also the planet itself is kind of what's at stake for for this movie and what could be future movies, because in the lore, they start fighting each other for the planet, and then the planet starts to die, and that's what forces them to go to Earth, and that's kind of where the live action movies started to tell that story. So they're fighting for their homeland or their home planet, and from the very beginning, I realized that the audience needs to fall in love with the planet so that we understand what's at stake here.
Mm-hmm. And it's a brand new world we've never seen before, but there is a relatable quality to it. Is that something that you were always conscious of?
Absolutely, yeah. I wanted to make sure, even in the city, that there was something to ground the audience, because sci-fi you can go anywhere with it, So even in the city, they have things that are shaped like newspaper stands, even though we don't even have those anymore. But just things like what are they called, ballards? Those things that you prevent you from driving off the edge of things.
Yeah.
So we had shapes of things that don't look like that, but when you saw them on the set, it would be like, oh, that feels familiar. You know, it feels like it's a city. Same thing with up above. We wanted to make sure that the mountains still felt like mountains, even though they are just jetted pieces of metal. I think it's important to always, specifically with a movie like this, you have to ground the audience into making sure they understand what they're feeling or what they're looking at.
And tell us the genesis of the stalactite, you know, the upside down buildings, how.
Yeah, so it was, that came from the idea that they'd be underground. So we wanted to make sure that they felt that they didn't know everything, so, and that they were kind of in hiding. So I just thought that was a cool way to show a city that is underground. It's like, why wouldn't they, and especially a world where characters can transform and fly around and go wherever they want, there's no reason to prevent them from building something from the top.
You work closely with ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. Their approach, of course, is for CGI, for action films. Was that impactful in this film? Approaching it as CGI as opposed to animation.
Well, it's yeah. So they did an animated movie. I can't remember what year it was. I want to say 2005 was Rango. And that was the first movie, maybe it was before that, but that was the first animated film they'd done for a long time. They just did the other one recently, I can't remember the name of it. But then they were excited to do this, and so the approach is a little different. They're used to taking individual shots, and putting a transformer into that live action shot. And so this is them starting from the very beginning, creating everything in the frame. And a lot of my animators were the same animators that had done the live action ones, but they were very excited because we were kind of going back design-wise to the Transformers that that we all knew growing up in the 80s, that the G1, Generation 1, and they were very excited to animate like just character animation. It wasn't just fighting and blowing up buildings. It was, I told them I want to be able to get in really close on the faces and see the thinking and see the subtext that's going on in there. And they were really, really excited about that. In fact, I'd throw them challenges. I said, there's no reason for a robot to blink. They don't have eyeballs, and they don't need to moisten their eyeballs. So what can we do to show a character thinking that's not a blink? Because that's, if, as a human, that's how we tell if somebody's thinking. They're just constantly, that kind of thing. So they came up with an idea that I love, which you probably saw in there, where the eyes are like camera lenses. And so they focus this way, and they kind of go in and out. So on the close-up shots, the characters they don't blink at all until there's a couple shots where it's really impactful that I wanted Ryan to not know what to do next, and you see him kind of blink once or twice. But usually, just to show the inner workings, it's the camera lens eyes.
Yeah, I noticed that they move like robots, but then they show so much emotion, in their faces and their eyes in particular. Was there an adjustment about how they moved to make them look more like robots, but then the emotion?
This is where ILM is one of the best. It's just that we did a lot of tests early on to see how even walk cycles, just to have Bumblebee move from there to there, what would that look like? And some of them, I remember the one test they did, and he just kind of was waddling, and it just looked like a kid with a full diaper. And I was like, no, we need to make him still feel robotic. And so it was finding that balance of robot movement, but still having the human side come through.
You mentioned Bumblebee. We're used to Bumblebee being the silent type, and here he's motor mouth. How did, tell us about that transition?
So I love the idea. First of all, I love in the live action ones that they did that. They made him a silent characters like Charlie Chaplin, which I thought was brilliant. But now that we're backing up and telling a story when he's on Cybertron, knowing that the audience would come in with that expectation of him being silent, I was thinking, let's go the opposite direction. Let's go have him not being able to shut up. And I had just worked with Keegan-Michael Key on Toy Story 4, and as soon as I was thinking of doing Transformers, I said, hey, would you be interested in doing Bumblebee? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. Yeah. And so he is just, he can say anything. He can read the phone book, and it's hilarious. So I was excited to play around with that.
We're so used to listen to the voice of Peter Cullen in all of the films, but now you switched to Chris Hemsworth. Tell us about that.
That is the idea that kept me up at night. The second I signed on the dotted line to make this movie, I thought, how in the world are we going to do this? Because it's Optimus Prime, but much younger. And how do we connect that? So, and Peter Cullen is Optimus Prime in my mind. That's the Optimus Prime I grew up with, everybody grew up with and knows. And so the thing being that this is Ryan Pax, he's a younger version that will eventually become that. That gave me the freedom in my mind to go, okay, we can try something a little different. And you know, we were throwing around names, and somebody mentioned Hemsworth, and I thought about it like, well, he does have the depth. He's got the power in his voice. And so when I met with him, we talked about it, and I was also thinking, wait, he's Australian. How's that going to work? And then he said, no, mate, I'll do an English accent, sure. And so he was great. He was fantastic. And there was the first time we recorded, you know, he was bringing this kind of looseness and this kind of, you know, he's not as refined, just kind of a little more immature to the character, which I thought was really cool. It wasn't too far. It was like, okay, I can see a character going through this arc and kind of getting there. And then by the time we were recording to the third act and kind of the speech that he gives to the miners there in their barracks, we were recording at his house actually, and I saw him kind of like even stand up a little straighter and just kind of puff his chest out, and he started to have the cadence of a leader, and I got chills, I got goosebumps, and I was like, "What are you doing right now?" And he's like, "Oh, I just thought I'd play around." And I'm like, "No, let's figure this out, because I think you're hitting on something." And so then it became about the balance of finding when that would happen, when that change would start to happen.
And Peter wasn't upset about being bypassed for...
No, we talked to Peter. Yeah, no, he's fine, and he will be Optimus in the live action ones.
Excellent.
Peter Cullen.
One of the great set pieces is the Iacon 500, which is like a Formula One. You know, tell us about approaching that set piece.
So I love racing. I love Formula One, and I'd worked on the Cars movies and everything. So I was excited to do a race in the Transformers world, because it meant that it could be a race that could only be done in Transformers, which is transforming as you're running, as you're racing. And so the idea of that was like, let's make it the coolest thing we've ever seen. And I mean, this is the short version. We had a much longer version storyboarded that was way too expensive, but it was just, let's put our characters through hell and force them to work together, and really kind of go, we like seeing these two characters together. They're functional. They're able to do, you know, the impossible. And then it just became a perfect way to get friction in the relationship early on.
You mentioned that the transforming. Tell us about animating the transformation. Was that as challenging as it looks?
I thought it would be, and we had Amy Christensen, who works for ILM. She's a designer. She's designed a lot of Star Wars stuff. She's designed everything. She's wonderful, and she's also the biggest Transformers fan I've ever met in my life. And she was so excited to come onto the show. And I asked her, like, you know, in the live action films, one of the things they do in order to change from one 3D model to the next 3D model is a lot of, you know, either smoke will come up in the frame, or the camera will go through the character as they're transforming. And that's a visual way just to cheat the model change. And I said to her, you know, I'm seeing this as we're on their planet. Transforming should be as simple as a jog into a run. You know, it just needs to be natural. And I would love to not have to just keep pushing into the character in order to switch the models out. And she went, okay. And then she came back the next day and she goes, so here's how they can look from, you know, when they're robots, then here's when they're vehicles. And I go, these look fantastic. And she goes, oh, yeah, and they're 1-for-1, so they'll work. I said, what do you mean? And she goes, I figured it out, so they can actually transform and it'll be exactly what you see. I was like, I still can't believe it when I see it. She actually figured it out. Like she basically made the toy for Hasbro.
Also, there is this incredible sense of speed in it. And then, I was watching the details. There is all this repeating patterns in the roadway. Can you tell us about that?
Anything to show speed, because we're in this alien planet. The scale is so different from what we know on Earth, so we needed to, there's a lot of light poles that go past, in the background, just to sell speed. There's a lot of particulate in the air that goes whizzing by in the close-ups. Anything that we could add just to sell the fact that these guys are going fast was important.
Yeah, no, I was noticing that we're used to, when we're on the freeway, we see the yellow lines. And in your film, there's all these repetitive, different type of visuals that go by.
That's all, all on purpose. I mean, as you know, or maybe people don't know, everything in CG, in a CG film, has to be designed and made. Like, we do everything. There's nothing for free. Like, if this was live action, if we're shooting us right now, we're here, we're people, we have clothes on, you get all that stuff. But in CG, everything has to be designed and built, from the buildings to the characters down to, I direct the particles in the air. Sometimes the particles would get in the way of the characters' faces. And I go, can we kill that particle? And they go, yeah, we can. We'll remove that one.
Tell me about the score, which is phenomenal. Brian Tyler. It's a very unique sound to the film.
He is, if you've not heard, well, I guarantee you have heard Brian Tyler. If you didn't know it, he's done everything under the sun. And when I met with him, I told him I love orchestral scores that have big themes, like John Williams, all that. And he's like, I love it. And like I said, this isn't Earth, so we can't just put Earth-sounding music on this. It just wouldn't fit. And because we tried it, and it just was kind of odd. And so he said, yeah, let's try something different. What I didn't know until later is that Brian Tyler does phenomenal orchestral scores, and he's also a DJ. He also performs at Outside Lands and Burning Man and stuff. So he took his own orchestral score and basically remixed it afterwards, and worked in a bunch of, you can hear the sound of Transformers in the score, just, all that is actually in the music. And I was telling him earlier that when I first met him, we connected, just everything I was saying, we were kind of finishing each other's sentences. And he said, well, so what do you think about the feeling of the score overall? How would you describe it? And I said, I don't know how else to put this, but Carl Sagan wrote this, the pale blue dot, if anybody's heard of that, which is talking about Earth and how small Earth is in context of everything else in the universe. And I said, the feeling that I get reading the pale blue dot, I would love the music to sound like that, which I know is that's horrible direction. I know that, but I said, I don't know how else to describe it. And he goes, pale blue dot was in my wedding vows. I went, okay. We're already on the same page. And he's like, I got it. Don't worry about it. I got it. I'm like, great. And he nailed it. I'm very, very happy with it.
Wow. So it's going to continue, obviously. Are you going to be involved with the
I hope so.
ongoing saga?
Yeah, we'll see. We've been having some early talks about stuff. So there's more story to tell. They become enemies and eventually show up on Earth. But
awesome.
Yeah.
And last question, working with Scarlett Johansson as Alita 1, what was that like?
So I worked with Scarlett on a previous project, and so as we were writing Alita's character, and I wanted to make sure that, Transformers is a very male-heavy cast, as it's always been from the 80s, and so I was very excited to bring her character even more forward. And as we were writing it, all I could hear was her voice in my head. And I called her and I said, I've got this character. I'd love for you to read it and just to see what you think. And she's like, absolutely, this is awesome. Mm-hmm. So
when actors record, they're not all together. You work individually with each voice?
Yeah, so this is one of the magic tricks of animation is occasionally, I have done that before, where you record two characters together. On Toy Story 4, we got Tom Hanks and Annie Potts together in the same room because they know each other really well, and also the relationship, you can hear it come through the recording, I believe. But on this film, everybody was recorded independently, and they are, basically, I'm acting against them, and so I'm reading, like, I'm recording Chris, I'm reading all the Megatron lines opposite him. And I found that for me personally, I can actually direct through my acting with them, because they don't know. We record the voices first, and then we do the animation. So they don't know how far away the characters are from one another, but I have that in my head. And so instead of telling them, hey, talk like you're 4 feet away, I just read the line opposite, quieter, and then he naturally matches it. And then if I say it louder, then he kind of will match that. So I've found over the years that it's a good way to help direct those little details that they just don't know because there's nobody else around them. Chris is literally in a tank top in his living room recording. There's no way he has the context for it.
Yeah. Well, you're always a joy to have as a guest here. Please come back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for watching the movie.
Yeah, and Josh is sticking around for a reception, so if you guys want to join us with Josh at the reception, it's right next door. So please come on over and have a glass and some food. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.